Ethan Gray was 14, but the world often treated him like he was a comic relief character in some cruel play. His laughter, sharp and unrestrained, could slice through the solemnity of any room. Courtrooms, classrooms, even the police station, nowhere was safe from the echo of his sardonic amusement. He didn't just laugh, he performed, with every tilt of his head and flash of his green eyes, as if the universe were a poorly written joke, and he was the punchline. It began, as all infamous stories do, with a minor incident. The kind that adults dismiss as harmless teenage rebellion but which, when examined closely, hinted at a mind both mischievous and alarmingly perceptive. Ethan had been caught borrowing a display mannequin from the local department store. The police officer, a burly man named Sergeant O'Connell, didn't know whether to arrest him or call a psychologist. Ethan stood in the station, hands in his pockets, grinning like the Cheshire Cat, and recited the Miranda rights back to O'Connell. With added commentary. You know, technically, you should have read the whole thing slowly, with feeling. It makes the threat of incarceration far more intimidating. I recommend practice, Ethan said, twirling an imaginary mustache. O'Connell blinked. He'd never been spoken to like that before. It was audacious, frustrating, and unsettling. By the time Ethan appeared in court, the small town of Riverton had already heard whispers. The kid who mocked the law. The boy who made serious adults squirm with nothing more than words and a smile. The courtroom was silent as the judge, an austere woman named Helen Vickers, addressed him. Ethan Gray, you are charged with theft and defiance of authority. How do you plead? Guilty of stealing attention, Your Honor, Ethan replied. The corners of his mouth lifted. As for defiance, well, that seems subjective, doesn't it? Gasps filled the room, murmurs rippled through the audience. The jury exchanged uneasy glances. The judge's gavel trembled in her hand. Young man, she said, pinching the bridge of her nose, do you have any respect for this court? Respect, Ethan said, considering the word. I have studied it extensively. I find it fascinating how adults insist on valuing it, then get so angry when it's analyzed. Perhaps I respect the idea of respect, but not the execution. By the end of the hearing, the courtroom had erupted into laughter, not all of it nervous, some of it genuine. Local newspapers had their headlines ready. Teen makes courtroom a stage in Riverton's newest celebrity, the Laughing Rebel. Ethan's rise to notoriety was not instantaneous, but it was inevitable. Videos of his courtroom antics appeared online, first shared by an intern reporter looking for clicks, then reposted across social media. Memes followed. Tweets. Commentary videos. The town's local TV station even invited him for an interview. He showed up, naturally, wearing a suit 2 sizes too big, a bowler hat, and a monocle he had bought online purely for theatrical effect. Why are you famous? The anchor asked. Ethan paused. He tapped his chin dramatically. Because the world enjoys a little chaos with its coffee. Or perhaps because they've been waiting for someone to say the unsayable in a way that's amusing. The interview went viral. People around the world marveled at this boy who could confront authority with nothing more than wit and charm. Critics called him a prodigy of mischief, a modern-day court jester, and the adolescent provocateur society didn't know it needed. But fame, as Ethan quickly discovered, was double-edged. He received fan mail, yes, but also threats. Adults scowled at him. Teachers eyed him with suspicion. Some even whispered about sending him away to reform schools. Yet Ethan thrived. Every obstacle became a performance, every challenge an opportunity to outwit, to outlaugh, to outshine. One evening, while live streaming a mock debate with his own reflection, Ethan received a direct message from a follower. You're insane. Why do you keep antagonizing authority? Ethan leaned closer to the camera, green eyes gleaming. Authority, he said slowly, is a story told by those who fear losing the plot. I merely edit the narrative. And that, in essence, was Ethan Gray, a boy who transformed defiance into art, rebellion into spectacle, and notoriety into currency. Over time, he began to monetize his infamy, a YouTube channel, speaking engagements, cameo appearances on quirky talk shows. His fans adored him, his detractors seethed, But the laughter never ceased. Even as he grew older, the legend of Ethan Gray remained rooted in that first courtroom. That single performance, a combination of daring, intelligence, and sheer audacity, had launched a lifetime of fame, proving that sometimes, to be remembered, one simply had to laugh when the world expected silence. Yet beneath the theatrics, Ethan was more than a performer. He was acutely aware of the attention he commanded, and sometimes, in the quiet of night, he wondered if the world loved him for himself or for the chaos he created. But such reflections were fleeting, for the next performance was always waiting, the next challenge to authority looming, and the laughter, oh, the laughter, must continue. The following week, Ethan's notoriety had reached a tipping point. The town of Riverton was divided into two camps, those who adored him and those who despised him. Even the police department had started holding strategy meetings about the boy who seemed untouchable, not because he was physically threatening, but because he had mastered the art of psychological chaos. Sergeant O'Connell was at his wits' end. "I've dealt with pickpockets, drunk drivers, and a man who tried to sell a raccoon as a dog. But this kid. He rubbed his temples. He makes me question why I even joined the force." Ethan, of course, had no intention of going quietly. His next stunt was simple in concept but devastatingly effective. He staged a courtroom fashion show. He arrived at the next hearing in a series of increasingly ridiculous outfits, each more elaborate than the last. The first day, he wore a full pirate costume. The second, a Victorian gentleman's attire complete with a cane and top hat. On the third, he appeared as a mad scientist, lab coat and all, carrying a rubber chicken under one arm. The judge, Judge Vickers, had begun preparing her speeches in advance, but even she struggled to maintain composure. "Ethan Gray," she said, her voice tight, "your theatrics are distracting. Do you have anything to say for yourself?" "Your Honor," Ethan began, sweeping a grand bow, "I am merely enhancing the ambience of this legal environment. Some would call it flair. Others might say chaos. I prefer enrichment." By the third outfit, the courtroom was laughing uncontrollably. The sheriff's deputies could barely maintain a straight face. Even the stenographer had started typing with tears streaming down her face from suppressed laughter. Word spread quickly. A local blogger live-streamed the hearing. Within hours, clips of Ethan's courtroom fashion week went viral. Memes, GIFs, reaction videos, everyone more absurd than the last. Ethan Gray became the poster child for teenage rebellion with style. The fame, however, brought its own complications. Fans sent him gifts, a box of glitter, a crown made of tinfoil, and an actual rubber chicken signed by fans. Meanwhile, detractors, parents, local authorities, and rival teens, plotted his downfall. But Ethan, as always, anticipated it. When the police tried to detain him for what they called disrespecting the court, Ethan's response was surgical. He had memorized every minor procedural rule and loophole, and he used them with precision. "You cannot arrest me for smiling in the presence of authority," he said calmly, quoting an obscure legal precedent he had found in an old law book. "Unless, of course, you can cite the exact statute. And while you search for it, might I suggest we enjoy a cup of tea?" By now, Ethan's online following had grown into tens of thousands. Teenagers from across the country sent messages of admiration, mimicking his sarcasm and cheeky humor. Local journalists started referring to him as the courtroom trickster and Riverton's young iconoclast. Even traditional media took notice. National news programs invited him for interviews, intrigued by the teen who had outwitted not just local law enforcement but an entire town's sense of decorum. Ethan, naturally, played the role to perfection. Every appearance was a performance, a mix of intelligence, audacity, and relentless mockery of the adult world's obsession with rules. One evening, as he sat in his room surrounded by fan mail and viral screenshots, Ethan realized that his notoriety had become a form of power. With nothing more than a smile, a witty remark, and a flair for drama, he could command attention, manipulate perception, and even influence public opinion. But fame was addictive, and Ethan craved more. His next target, the annual Riverton Debate Championship, he entered as a wild card, announcing he would redefine the rules of rhetoric. Opponents and judges alike were skeptical, expecting a child's tantrum. What they didn't expect was Ethan's ability to combine logical argumentation with biting satire. By the final round, Ethan's performance was nothing short of legendary. He deconstructed his opponent's arguments with razor-sharp precision, then punctuated each point with theatrical gestures and comedic timing that left the audience both awestruck and in stitches. Social media exploded once again. Clips of his debate circulated worldwide, cementing his reputation as a prodigy of both intellect and audacity. From that moment on, Ethan Gray was no longer just a local troublemaker. He had become a symbol, the teenage rebel who laughed at authority, challenged social norms, and transformed mockery into fame. The boy who once amused a courtroom now captivated the world. Yet, behind the laughter and viral videos, Ethan knew one truth: the world would not always laugh with him. So he planned carefully, always calculating, always performing. Fame was a stage, authority a prop, and he, the mischievous, brilliant, audacious Ethan Gray, was the star who refused